Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyreek Glasgow. I'm the Executive Director of Young Chances Foundation, and I just want to welcome to the Huddle. This is a community conversation on men's mental health. I'm going to introduce the panel, but I want to give a little foreground on what this event is about. When you hear today, you're going to probably hear me a lot, but when you hear me, think of the mental and emotional health of our community, specifically Black men. We're going to talk about mental health, emotional health, but also the resources that are out there, trying to get rid of some of the stereotypes, changing some of the communication between not only us men, but in the community, and having icons of sports here to translate that not only from the work that they did professionally, but some of the work that they're doing with their organizations, but also personally. We have Isan here. We also have Rodney, Dr. J, and Brian Westbrook. And before I do want to give a thank you to Principal Josh here at Alden Reed for opening up his doors today. Definitely running the school and then making sure that we can have this venue, especially in this community that's right here, is very important. So I just want to make sure that Mr. Anderson understands we appreciate him opening up the doors and everything else. I'm gonna pass it off to our panelists, and then we're gonna get into the discussion.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Isan Hines. I am a father, Philadelphia native, and also I'm the president and founder of a nonprofit organization known as My Brother's Keeper Cares. I lost a younger brother, Atif, to suicide, and I've also struggled with my own mental health, and I created an organization to try and help our community deal with their mental health and create spaces for young people to be able to get tools that they need moving forward to not only prevent suicide, but also learn how to self-regulate, learn how to be peer support for one another, and just make it through the city, through a hard life in this city, through what can be a hard life in this city. Thank y'all.
Hello everyone, my name is Rodney Babb. I am the lead violence recovery specialist for Penn Medicine. I work with people that come into our trauma department with violent injuries, specifically gun injuries, gunshot wounds, blunt assault, stab wounds, and I support them bedside. So once they come into the hospital, I meet them in the trauma bay, provide one-on-one psychoeducation, some one-on-one counseling, and then I continue to follow them while they're inpatient, connect them to resources. But once they're outpatient, that's where the real work step in. I follow these patients for about 6 months to a year, and just being a liaison from the hospital to the, for the families, but also supporting them one-on-one as far as making sure they have therapy, making sure they're at their doctor's appointment, and just providing the right resources for them to recover after their violent injury.
So I'm Julius Erving, affectionately known as Dr. J. That is part of the story where Dr. J came from a long time ago in middle school in Long Island. I started calling a buddy the professor. He started calling me the doctor, and now we're still really great friends. And we're in our middle 70s, and we still are able to get away with that. The reason that I'm here is because we've created a cordial and congenial situation with Penn Med, and we've been able to make some house calls in the community. We've gone out with a couple of the doctors to visit some patients who are getting home care, and this is a little bit of a different twist than visiting the home care patients, because we get a chance to hang out with Brian, we get a chance to learn, and I have found that the best way for me to learn is to listen. And from a young stage of my life, I somehow became a good listener, and I guess because maybe my sister was talking all the time, my brother was talking all the time, that I was that middle child, and I became the good listener. So hopefully as an audience, you guys will be able to hear something today that helps you and that you could take back to share with others, your children, your siblings, and your neighbors. Thank you.
And I'm Brian Westbrook, former Philadelphia Eagle for 8 years.
Birds. Go Birds, that's right. I went to Villanova University, so I truly became a man here in Philadelphia. I also still get nervous. Every time I see Dr. J, say, Dr. J is gonna be there, Julius is gonna be there, I get nervous sometimes because he's still the coolest man that you could possibly know. So that doesn't change. But the reason why we're here today and the reason why I'm here is very simple. I have a few companies that I run. I have affordable development and a home care real estate company that we build affordable housing in the community. I have a engineering staffing company. We do staffing solutions and stuff. But most importantly, I run the Brian Westbrook Foundation as the founder and CEO. And our mission is simple. We want to serve our community. We want to empower them. We want to educate them. We want them to embrace us. We want to show them and give them access to opportunities and access to jobs and things of that nature. And the question for us is always, what more can we do? How do we engage more young people? How do we make sure that we keep our young people off the street and keep their minds stimulated? And that falls right in line with mental health and all the things that we'll be talking about here tonight. I'm super happy to be here, but it's these conversations that we have to have more of. There's these conversations that break down the stigma. When you have great men like these young men here, Dr. J, that can break down the walls and say, it's okay to talk about your mental health. It's okay to lean on someone's shoulder and say, I ain't got it today. And before we start, I'll tell this quick story, and this just happened this past weekend. I'm at a game, and I see my boy Trey Thomas. Trey Thomas, 6'7", left tackle, played in the league 15 years, 320 pounds. And so he gives me a hug. He bends down and gives me a hug. I'm a small guy. And the first thing he said to me is, man, you all right? And I'm smiling. I'm having a great time. You know, we're having a good time at the tailgate. I'm like, yeah, I'm straight, man. I'm good. And he took his big old hands and he put it on my shoulder. He said, nah, are you all right? And I was like, I think so. I thought I was, but it made me think a little bit deeper than what the real conversation we were having was. And as men, as women as well, sometimes we got to shake each other up and say, you all right? And that's what this conversation is about. And so I'm happy to be here, and thank you all so much for being here as well.
We want to get into the open discussion. We have a couple questions from the icons too, but like you hear the panel say, today is about opening up that conversation to making sure that everything is out in the open, and we're going to get rid of the stereotypes. And before we begin, I see one of my OGs in the room, Senator Williams, and I really want to say this because this is not a political thing. We were sitting back and having a conversation, and everyone talked about themselves. And as I was riding up here, there was a song on Mary J, and it said, if you look in my eyes and you see what I see, you know, things are a little different. You know, people may see the outside of you, they may see some of the things that are getting posted, they may see, but the inside is what we are here to talk about today. So, Brian, Dr. J, y'all have any?
So, as a last surviving member of the immediate family, I like to meet new people. I like to have conversations with strangers. And believe it or not, you know, even being who I am, I'm still approachable in that regard. And I enjoy it because, you know, I guess you're always looking for a void, you know, to be filled with something. So I got so many surrogate brothers and sisters and moms and dads, you know, out there, and it's kind of fun. It keeps me young. Yeah.
That's part of the community, you know. And Brian, you just talked about growing up with those things that aren't normal, and you know, you come from the same background. How do y'all not make that normal, so to say? And I'm just listening to you for 30 years ago to some of the issues that we're still dealing with now in our community, especially as young men, of not being cool, or, you know, that trauma. How are you dealing with that, or, you know, changing how that's looked?
Well, you know, even though I had both my parents with me as a child and really throughout my life, you know, mental health was not something that we talked about. It wasn't something that we dealt with. Unfortunately, when people die from suicide, we're like, oh, well, he had a problem, instead of he had something that we could have addressed
20 years ago. 2 years ago, you guys are familiar with the XFL Football League, right? So I was the director of player engagement for the XFL a couple years ago. And one of the most important things to me was to let our players know that they had access to as much mental health work, to people that they possibly could engage with. And it was important, and I thought it was something that everybody would run to and jump to, because I was like, listen, I ain't telling the coaches, I ain't talking to nobody else, it's just between me and you. When I was in the NFL, it seems like forever ago, I retired 14 years ago now, we just had this little doctor. I never really knew this guy. So in the training room, everyone's hanging out. There's this little guy just walking around. And I'm like, and I always was like, who's this little weird guy walking around? And he was a mental health doctor. And I literally didn't know that until my last year in Philadelphia. I was there for 8 years, didn't know. And there were a lot of men on our team talking to him, but we weren't sharing it. It was just like, I'm gonna keep my mental health problem over here to myself, and you keep yours to yourself. Because it was something that you never really talked about. The crazy part that I think about now is that we had that in the locker room for millionaire grown men. And we have young people that are walking around amongst us today that need that help, that don't realize that we have those access to the help, and don't understand that they have people that have a vested interest of them being better. And it's a sad reality for us. And we wish this is why we're having a conversation, so that hopefully we can go back into our communities and say, listen, there's someone that can help. And before we go past this step, let's get this mental health check, just to make sure that we're all good.
We're all good. Rodney, Easton, you want to give a little backstory on not only the work that y'all are doing, but how that impacts our community?
So as I just said, I work with the gun violence survivors and other survivors of violent injury at Penn Medicine. And not too long ago, as we all know, there was a mass shooting here in South Philly. And basically, mental health, everyone involved in that mass shooting, whether it was a person who was directly injured or non-directly injured, had a mental health, problem at that time, whether it was anxiety, depression, just trying to figure out what's next steps. And I think that, as a health system or as people, as a community, it's not talked about as much. We don't talk about, hey, you're experiencing anxiety, you're experiencing PTSD. But I think that as more community members like these community members that I'm on a stage with, community members that are doing the work with big organizations like Penn, Temple, along as we come together and make it known to the community, like, hey, this is what mental health is, and this is how we can help address these situations coming into the community after events like this happen, but also learning that there's preventable ways for these events can happen as well. So just talking to the community about what mental health is, but also identifying what is mental health, because many people do believe that mental health is a bad thing. Mental health is only a suicide or depression, but no, mental health is everyday life. Whether that's you having anxiety getting up and going to work, whether that's you having difficulty in school, in your everyday life, having someone to talk to is important. And it's the fact that, as these two guys said, they had the access to it, but not many of us out here has access to it or know that there is access to mental health resources out there, free services as well.
So I'm a loss survivor, and being a loss survivor put me in a space where I had to deal with my brother's death in a very hard way. It made me feel guilt from times when we had sibling rivalry as a kid. And anybody out there who's ever lost somebody to suicide, it's a unique type of death because it causes people to think, what could I have done to help someone? And now, my years after my brother has died, I have a lot more experience. I'm not an expert. My experiences have equipped me with more information and encounters with people. But through it, I've learned that there are warning signs and things you can look at, but there's a lot of things we don't know exist. In my own crisis, in October 2018, I almost took my life. I had a plan to take my life. And that's someone who knew what it was like to lose someone and knew the impact it had on my family, and also knew how many people were looking at me as a sign of hope. and I still struggled. And I think it's important to realize like leaders can struggle and people who are advocates can struggle. There are people who have died by suicide. I remember years ago, someone who was in charge of the psychology department at Penn, they died by suicide. And on that was the week of suicide prevention week, to be exact. And we also lost a pastor of a mega church, I believe in California, that same week. So people in positions struggle. But I didn't realize what resources were there, and my struggle introduced me to something called the Employee Assistance Program. So like Brian was saying, something that was there as a resource. Many people have resources that your employer actually provides. And my employer at the time provided 3 free sessions for me to see a counselor. And that counselor has now been my counselor with a copay and with other payments for 7 years now. So that I'm able to get the sustained help that I need. Also, one thing I want to say before I move on, stigma in some spaces is real. I don't think that it's as real as it said it's real. When you create opportunities for people to talk, they talk. When you create spaces for people to have these conversations, they show up and they engage and they're vulnerable. And sometimes stigma, the word is used in a way that I don't believe is real, particularly for the Black community. You give us a chance to speak, we're going to speak. And you give us a chance to be supported, we're going to accept that support, especially if it's coming from a place of trust and real care.
And just like to piggyback what he said about the stigma part, as we all, the stigma is like Black people, Black men, we don't use mental health, we don't want therapy, but that's absolutely a lie. Every time I go into a bedroom, into the hospital, and ask a patient, a young male, or just a man in general about do they want therapy, are they interested in psychology, are they interested in psychiatrists to come in and talking to them, they say yes. And that shows right there that stigma is not a stigma no more. People want help, but people just don't know how to ask for help or accept the help or don't know where to get the help from.
So we had a couple questions. Do you want to go first?
No, you go.
Okay, perfect. So, we'll ask these questions, and certainly, the wonder is always, when did you begin your mental health journey in your life? The question for a lot of young people is like, that's something I could worry about later on, and I'll worry about when I go to college. I'll worry about it when I'm finished high school. When did you guys start your mental health journey?
For me, I started when I was 18. I transitioned from West Philly to Penn State, so that whole situation was a big transition for me. But not only that, I was like one of the only Black kids in a class of all white people, and during that time, on top of that, there was the whole Trump running for office thing. So I was in the middle of like nowhere in the woods, and there was just so much going on I was not used to. So I sought to find therapy for myself because I was lost. I didn't have a mom or dad that went to college and navigated the system. And I had a high school counselor, but that stops in high school. They don't follow you into college. So me, entering college and figuring out I'm in the real world now and I need support. My mental isn't there anymore. That was when I first started to receive help and therapy and just other services for me.
Do you think that, being a little bit older now, do you wish that you had it started a little bit earlier?
Yeah.
Or you think that when you started at the perfect time, you're good there?
No, definitely early. I think early intervention and early access is the key for prevention.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Esau?
So I started being more intentional about taking care of my mental health in 2018, but I was introduced to the conversation. I was a teenager. I have a quick story. When I was a teenager, I had a mentor who was a Air Force general. He also was a dermatologist. His name was Dr. Harold Pierce. And I borrowed his car without his permission while he went on a trip.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. He went on a trip to California. He had 3 cars. I took one of his cars for a trip when I just got my license, and fate be it the way it was, I got into a car accident on my way to take the car back to his house. Somebody ran a red light and hit me. That's besides the point. Instead of like seeing what I did, he actually tried to get me therapy at that time when I was 17. And I remember feeling like that was the first time I ever heard about that, but I didn't actually engage in it. He tried to get me to support, and I love my mom, but my mom didn't really want that in the home. And that was the first time I was introduced to the conversation about therapy. But I also think that it's important to identify all of us deal with our mental health from the day we're born, because all of us have mental health. Whether we're intentional about caring for it is a different conversation. But it took my crisis in 2018 to be more deliberate and realize like I really, really need help. And it also became from people supporting me. One of my friends and brothers is in the audience, brother Eric Marsh Jr., Eric Marsh Sr. And he's someone who came into my life at a time when I was just coming out of my crisis and showed me the way. So it took some people actually helping me to stand. And also it took some deliberate intention to stay in therapy. And that started in 2018 for me. But I think that all of us have mental health. Actually, I know all of us have mental health. It's just as normal as our physical health. Yes. And it needs to be defined properly so that people don't confuse mental illness and mental health. We all have mental health.
Yeah. One of the things I heard you mention was you were intentional about it. And so many things in our world, we just kind of fly by the seat of our pants. That's just kind of how we are sometimes. But when you're intentional about things, you actually get things done. Things happen because of that. And it's so great to hear. I see these young people around here a little bit, and one of those important things, and Dr. J would probably tell, and I'll ask you, Doc, when you became intentional about being one of the best basketball players in the world, what was those things that you did that changed you from just being okay, average, to one of the best ever?
There's a scale from 1 to 10. Physical, mental, emotionally, spiritually. Rate yourself in all those categories. I say physical, well, the 10 comes in because, that's sports, right? Mental, you'd love to be a 10. Emotionally, right? And physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And spiritually, God's in your life and truly in your life. You want that to be a 10 too. So from the time I was introduced to that to the day, I've tried to get 10s across the board, and that's like trying to master the game of golf. It ain't gonna happen because even the best in the world get cut and they are sent home on Saturday and Sunday some weeks. But so trying to be a 10, it's a long, hard journey and it's uphill, and everybody should feel that way. Everybody should feel that way, and mental is included in there, but it really wasn't introduced as mental health. It was introduced as being mentally challenged to get educated, get the most out of your educational process. This is your mental challenge. But we all need to, look around us and look at one another the same way and say that we want all the people around us to be the complete package. That's what I was searching for, because I used to call it the complete package, was being a 10 physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
You got to be intentional. You have to be intentional in sports and business world, but you also got to be intentional about your mental health and the things that you do to prepare yourself every single day, and that's super important. Ty, one of the things that I think about, because you're helping kids every single day, but there are times where you become stressed, where you become overwhelmed with life. We all live in this world. I got 3 kids, and every day I wake up like, man, these jokers right here. But what do you do when life is just lifing, as they say? Overwhelmed, stress. What are the things that you do personally to kind of get you out of that mode?
So my grandma, my mom raised me. I go back home, I pray. I sometimes listen to a soundtrack that can change how I'm feeling. Gospel started, my upbringing. Sometimes I question my work, but the most important part was the love part. And it was the scripture, Proverbs 3, verse 5 through 6. It was, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Some people in here know where I'm coming from. So I try to not question my journey, because the work that I'm doing now, I try not to have those kids in those environments. There's questions that's asked like, how many of you know someone who's been shot? And everybody raised their hand. How many of you have been next to someone who's been in jail? And everybody raised their hand. I don't want kids raising their hand in my organization. I want them to understand that there's resources. There's individuals who want to put better ingredients in their life. You know, you talk about walking to school growing up 30 years ago. To this day, those are the images that we try to change. Because kids should not see balloons and teddy bears and needles and things on the ground and on trees when that actually should be fresh fruit, vegetables, because these are the things that help our community, especially us, to prevent those things. You know, breakfast is the number one important meal of the day. And if you ain't eating, you ain't thinking. You know, critical thinking is part of what we need in our community, and to think that your mental health is not a part of those ingredients is what I try to do. You know, so I try to say, I'm not there yet. You know, take a seat. You know, like, what are you doing, Tyreek, that is having you going too fast? You know, I got 3 daughters. I love them. You know, one of the daughters, my oldest daughter, I watched her grow up on pictures in jail. You know, like the first day she went to school, her teeth came in, me calling, and she had to accept my phone call. I don't want that. I don't want anybody to go through not seeing their family, their children, you know, experience positive environments and feelings. You know, mentally, to me, that's why I go as hard as I can, not only for myself, for my community, because there's other people in our community who want those resources and don't have the table for it.
Yeah. Isana, what about you? Overwhelm, stress? What is the thing that grounds you, brings you back to the right mind?
It was a combination of things. So I often give this example to the young people I mentor. I talk about the Dora the Explorer show. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah. Dora had this backpack, and in there was a map. It was all these different things. So Dora knew what to pull out for whatever circumstance. So in my backpack, I have journaling, which I was introduced to through therapy. And it's not something that is just for little girls to write about in their diary. It's something that everybody should engage in or can engage in. Journaling has helped me. Praying, absolutely. Crying, absolutely. Going for walks. I like to walk along Kelly Drive. Walking by the water just helps me. But even just reaching out to people. I struggled today. I struggled hours before this platform. And I had to send out a group text message to the members of the board of my organization, letting them know, like, keep me in prayer. I'm not okay. And sometimes my schedule doesn't line up with where my mental and emotional health are, but just reaching out for support and remembering that I got over some of these things before. I think there's something very important to know. We live in a different time where there's a lot of exposure to trauma. So we see things more than we ever have in our lives. And the trauma impacts all of us. Even if you're not directly impacted by a gunshot, just hearing about it can make you afraid to go outside, so the impact is on you. And we're living in a world where there's so much exposure to all types of trauma, and that trauma is impacting our mental and emotional well-being in a community where I believe a lot of Black boys and men are carrying broken hearts. And the heartbreak can lead to a lot of really, really dangerous places. And it took me realizing I had a broken heart to get care, and I still carry a lot of that, but to get care and support and even recognize you have it. My first therapist told me, you can't conquer what you don't confront, you can't confront what you don't acknowledge, and you can't acknowledge what you don't see. He helped me to see, and now I'm realizing you can work back from seeing. Many of us are trying to work from a place of conquer, but you gotta start from seeing, then acknowledge what it is and work your way back to confronting it, and then work your back to either caring for or conquering it. And many broken hearts are starting to fight instead of seeing where they are, acknowledging where they are, confronting it and caring for that broken heart.
Well said, well said.
You can't conquer what you don't acknowledge. I'm sorry, you can't conquer, you got me confused now. All right. You can't conquer what you don't confront, you can't confront what you don't acknowledge, and you can't acknowledge what you don't see. And you can replace the word conquer with care, because you don't have to fight everything, but some things are just meant to be responsible for.
Love that. I mean, that's 100% exactly what we all need to do. There's a young brother that just passed away this morning, committed suicide, played 8 years in the NFL, 8 or 9 years in the NFL. He came in the year before me, played with the Cincinnati Bengals, young brother named Rudy Johnson, committed suicide. His family said he'd been struggling recently with some, suicidal thoughts and just couldn't conquer it, didn't have anyone to talk to, didn't know how to confront it, didn't realize who he needed to talk to, couldn't find the support. Rodney, we all go through moments of stress, being overwhelmed. You deal with gunshot wounds and people in the hospital that have been unfortunately shot. What are you telling these young people and just people in general while they're there about how they can handle mental health a little bit better and just move differently than they've been moving to put themselves in those situations?
Yeah. So the first thing I do when I meet with them is, make sure that they feel safe. Make sure they feel safe talking to me, making sure they feel safe in the hospital, but also making sure they're safe when the time comes to the hospital. But I'll also bring up the point of how their mental health will play an effect with their recovery. If you're not mentally well, it doesn't matter how many times you're going to physical therapy. It doesn't matter, you can go to the doctors every day and they can say you're fine, but if your mental health isn't, if you aren't prioritizing that, then that will play an effect as far as like your physical health. And a lot of people don't realize that until it happens to them. Because if you're, fighting the urge to get out of bed because you have PTSD and you have anxiety to go outside, to go to the doctors for something small, you're not going to be healthy physical, so you have to be healthy mental to get to that physical aspect. And again, like, as I said prior, a lot of the young men, or just a lot of men in general, want therapy. Like, I come to them and I make sure, we have our psychologists with us and we provide them the free therapy and they want it. So again, it's just basically letting them know that they have access to it. They have access for free services, and services that it's not going to cost them, but that's going to also follow them while they're outpatient for a few months to, get rid of PTSD. Because these things that we don't, PTSD, depression, anxiety, all this is curable, and I think if we have a way to pre-treat these things and have early access to these things, how we have access to, cancer. Before we have cancer, we have doctor screenings. We're doing so many screenings. Same way we could do for mental health. Have doctors do these multiple screenings and ask the questions in terms where people understand. Because I think a barrier as well is that when we are in these health systems, the doctors are using these big words that we don't even know what they're saying, So I think if, the providers can use words and use expressions that make us understand what's really going on, but for us to understand that it's okay to say, hey, I'm having nightmares because of my injury. Hey, I feel overwhelmed because I know who hurt me and now they're still out to get me. Those small conversations can lead to something big, which can help someone in their mental health.
We can't be afraid to face truly what our fears are. Those
Correct.
Things that stress us out. And I'm going to ask Julius this because, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking that when you're talking about face your fears, I mean, football, big, strong guys, tough, the physical presence is often so different than what's going on inside and whatever. And I know you've been in that locker room after games, and when you win, there's a big celebration, and when you lose, it's a little quieter. My thought was what is real toughness, and are you tough and strong because you can, sit on something that somebody told you about or something that you become made aware of, and you just want to take it to the grave. And now you don't hear people talk about that so much. It's like, okay, let's put our laundry out, on the racks, and let's air it and share it and we're all going to be better because of that. You know, and it's kind of hard because the society isn't about everybody financially being equal, intellectually being equal, spiritually being equal, but somehow we have to find a way of creating equal respect for one another. We need to be genuine in our approach, and I know that there's a lot of things that I can't physically do that I used to do with ease and whatever, so it really ain't about that. I don't find my happiness in going out and lifting 250 pounds or whatever. I found my happiness in being around somebody who is thinking and who cares, and I know in the clutch you're gonna be there for me because I'm gonna be there for you.
I think that image right there is part of what we're here, and I'm gonna swing it back, but that generational conversation and that latch is gone. It's important to hear that come from you, not only as the doctor, as the icon, but as a black man who been through those things, to lean on someone because, the stereotype is we're all tough. We don't need help. That our mental health is cool and we're not looking for those things. And to see someone, who is seasoned, who's been through those things helps, our work, because it gives us credibility because regardless of how high you get or low you get, we still have the same issues.
And also, for me, I would like to jump in and say like toughness, that word, like as Dr. J was saying, benching 250, like that's making you look tough, but also being a person and being vulnerable and saying, I need help, I need support. Asking questions to get the support or looking for the support for your mental health. That's toughness, being able to tough it out and say, okay, I do need help. Okay, I do need that mental health support. Where can I find it? Going out your way to even asking your doctors or speaking to your friends about it. That shows some toughness right there, because not everyone can do that,
One of my favorite teammates, and he's one of my best friends, and he was a mentor to me, Brian Dawkins, Hall of Famer. I was with him every single day. We prayed together every single day, talked on the phone all night long, every night. And it wasn't until after his career, I spent 8 years with this dude, right, that I found out that he struggled with mental illness. I'm like, what you talking about? You're the toughest, hard-nosed joker that I know. Knock everybody out, goes crazy, muscles, everything. I said, what are you talking about? How is this possible? He was like, no, I struggle with it every single day. He said I had to get in a routine of doing things a certain way so that I knew when I was going through those periods where I was struggling, I needed to talk to my mentor, my counselor, things like that. And as a younger man, this is 10, 15 years ago, I'm listening, I'm like, what are you talking about? You're the strongest, toughest dude I know. And it just goes to show you that if you're not intentional, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a mentor, you don't have somebody to lean on and say, hey, I'm going through something that I can't control by myself, then you're gonna be in a bad spot. And the worst spot is to be when you on E, you got 0 miles to go before you get to the gas station. Gas station is 20 miles away. That's the last place you want to be. And too often times, as men and as women, we put ourselves in the spot where we ain't got nothing left. And now I'm going through this crisis. And now I'm looking around like who I want to turn to. Brian Dawkins, because he was an older mentor, a tough guy, he didn't have, as his best friend on the team, he didn't have anybody to talk to on the team. And sometimes it truly is the best of us. And I can only imagine, Julius, you're on a team with greats, Philadelphia greats, but NBA greats, but you were the man. And at some point, you had to feel the stress of carrying a basketball team, carrying the load for your household. And you have to wonder, who the heck do you turn to?
Yeah. And luckily for me, some of my mentors became mentors for all of their lives. The first coach I had with the Salvation Army, I was a Salvation Army kid. First coach I had, a guy named Don Ryan, coached me. I was 12, he was 19. This guy, he's still alive. He's still a guardian angel to me because he was sent from heaven. You know, he took me off the streets. But Don was there, Ray Wilson, another mentor. He happened to be my high school coach. He came to UMass my second year, he coached at UMass, and you know, he lived till he was 86 years old, and he basically managed my office for me after I became a professional. So I had people who I never looked at myself as being bigger than or better than in any way, shape, or form, because when we met, you know, I was a little snotty-nosed kid, 12, 13 years old, or whatever. So I still, till the day he died, I called him Mr. Wilson. As I said, I was the last surviving member of the immediate family, but now I'm the head of the new families. And, you know, the head has to act accordingly and understand and then kind of pass the torch, you know. So with my sons and daughters and my grandchildren, you know, I'm investing the time into doing that. And then I got nieces and nephews as well, who I'm trying to invest time into letting them do things the right way.
I think it's real important that, you know, it's coming from y'all, like that community aspect. I know that y'all talk about your families and how y'all provide it, even on different levels. Everyone doesn't have that structure family-wise, but that community person, that 19-year-old who was in the community that brung you, that put you underneath his wing, is important to, especially the trauma that goes on into our community and how we deal with that mental health. Having people who are respectable and credible who know how to navigate that is strong. When Rodney was talking about the resources, I was just thinking about how the actual individual is hurt, but the family members go through some stuff. You know, the children, the mothers, the fathers, and making sure that, you know, that network is still taken care of is definitely important. So I'm glad that we're definitely having this conversation and seeing that it's not only the individual, but that community and network that gets that support too.
You know, one of the things that I think is special, right? We're all here because Penn Medicine brought us here. We brought us all together for this conversation. And so I guess the question is for us in the community, how do you think these health institutions really play a part in that? How do you think they, you know, you have to side with the people, right? The men, the women, the children, the teenagers, and then you have the health organizations that got to find a way to come together to help solve some of these issues, and maybe not solve, just deal with them. You know, what do you think what do you guys think of organizations like Penn Medicine and what they're doing to try to at least give the people that need the help, the mental help, the help that they need?
I'll speak to that. So we have allies through the University of Penn. Penn has a program called Penn Inspire, and it's a suicide prevention initiative. And they brought me on as a community advisor, and also Eric Marsh Sr., and they asked us for our input to what was going on in the communities that we were serving. And they also show up to the spaces and the events that we create, and they also help us when it comes to measuring our impact on the young people and the people that we serve in the community. They've shown up as allies, and they've shown up in a way to not take. And then our organization has been able to serve as a liaison between the community and the institutions. And the institutions have also financially supported us. And that speaks more than anything, because sometimes we can say what we need, but if you actually see what we need and you step in and say, we'll meet that need, then you're showing that you do care. But it took us, I want to go back to the time that we were having a community event, and our biggest struggle was just feeding people at our programs. It might cost $500 to get hoagie trays. And I said that to a doctor at Penn, and the doctor actually asked me to draw up a proposal for something that was more significant and defined. And it wound up becoming $20,000 worth of support. But it took asking and having a conversation, because sometimes people are in a position where they want to be supported and they also want to be supportive, you know what I'm saying? But it takes conversations, and when we think of institutions, remember there's just people behind there. My father was a state representative for 16, 17 years, and he always reminded me that he was an elected official, not a politician. It was the people who put him there. There's people behind politician roles, there's people behind doctor titles, behind anything. You all are people, you know, and sometimes people see our title and they don't see that we're just people. But when you put people in position to be people, they'll serve and they'll show up, they'll partner. And I'm glad that Penn has done that for our community.
Well, I'll say, that, you know, my relationship with Penn is a little different. I'm one of the activists who really, it's about the people. Penn Medicine, University of Penn, and the community is not looked at as a partner. But I'm piggyback what he said. Like the individuals that are at Penn is what makes the community move. Just like everyone may not love the Eagles, the Sixers, but it's specific players that has that impact on their life. When I told my mom we was doing this event, she didn't really care about it. And then I was like, Dr. J gonna be there. She was like, I'm gonna be there. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, so that is how I really try to approach the community and Penn. One of the meetings was held in West Philadelphia, and I'm gonna go back to the politician part, Penn part, but also the people behind there. Senator Williams, who is a politician, but he doesn't sugarcoat it when it comes to me. He doesn't play both sides, and he like, listen, you with Penn, they data, research, you know, grant money, all that. Like, what's going on? Because this is what they did in West Philly. They gonna come down to South Philly, do what, like, what's up? Like, young man, chill. You know, because he knows I just want to get out there. But he said, try to find something that Penn can do for your community. And I talked about raising my hand. You know, the mental health, the gunshots, and just being a victim. And there was another lady in a crowd was Sarah Solomon. You have to find individuals who did it right. I connected those resources together and really started to use the challenges, the why I was raising my hand from being a gunshot victim, not having fresh fruit in the community, not talking about mental health, not having access to public health issues that are there, and got into the the Community Scholars Program to put together my paperwork, because if I want to be at the table to get those resources, I have to have the ingredients to get us off. And then right after that, the consistency was, here's Penn. Hey, we're gonna have this conversation. Tariq, how do you think we can navigate that? You know, so being consistent, not only with the community, but with Penn, for them to really show their true colors. You know, show the individuals that are behind there doing that good work. Last week we did a event with Isan about slow suicides, about the things that are not immediate factors into your death. You know, the lack of communication, the lack of support, the lack of having that conversation or a safe space there was definitely important. One of the priority issues that we were trying to address in our community.
Rodney?
Can you repeat that question?
No, I can't repeat the question. No. We're just talking about institutions. How can institutions like Penn continue to support and help everything that you're doing? Obviously, you work there, but you know, how can they continue to support? And you know, personally, I'll say this: I'm just proud that they brought us here to have this conversation, because these conversations ain't happening everywhere. That's just period, right? I see these two young brothers right here, and how old are you guys? 21. 19, my goodness. They're your sons. I would give anything in the world to be 19 or 21, one more time. But these conversations are important for you two young brothers for an important reason. And I don't know your life situation, and it really actually doesn't even matter. There has to be someone that you guys can talk to. There has to be someone, sometimes it's your friends. There are times with my boys who are all older than me, and you know, I have made my money and I'm kind of the leader because I made a bunch of money, but they all be like, look, you ain't doing that. And that's it. Ain't no questions asked. Because those are the guys, OGs, whatever you want to call them, those are the guys that are saying, look, this ain't right, this ain't the way we moving. those also are the guys when I got trouble with my marriage, with my kids, the dude up the street. I'm like, hey man, the joke up the street starting to get on my nerves now. What do I need to do? Go talk to him. Okay, all right. Do I bring the bat or not? He said, no, don't bring the bat. Just walk up there and have a conversation with him like a grown man. Okay, I'll do that. And so one thing that I keep hearing, be intentional, find the resources, do the things, start early. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, and this is actually really important, there's an early prevention. There's something that you can do before it gets to that emergency state. And for me, I call my boys. Now, I tell you, my boys don't always have the best suggestions. Sometimes the suggestions is, all right, just go fight them. And I'm like, hey. But there's something that you guys do that grabs you a little bit before you go to that point where things get a little ugly and dark?
Yeah, communicate with people, your mentors. Like that's the first and foremost. Like, it depends on the situation. You know, like for you, you'll call your boys and they say go knock them out. But if you call your mentor, they'll talk some sense to you not to knock them out. You know, so that's one thing. But two, also being able to find out how to ground yourself. You know, whether that's going out for walks, as he was saying, next to the water.
So give us some examples of that. Walks. What are other examples?
So going out for walks, exercising, therapy is another good one. Finding things that makes you happy, whether that's finding a new hobby, you know, golfing, you know, pottery, anything that's going to get you out that space of being dull, of having anxiety, finding something new that's going to bring joy to your life.
Hey, I run to the dollar store a lot. The dollar shopping is one of the things. I probably grab a milkshake, just really try to eat. But for real, really networking or calling some of the old heads who've been through it. One of the OGs, Maliki, walked in a few months ago. I was snapping again, you know, this way. Well, this is how I communicate. And we were sitting at the bar and I was just telling him about family, which we call it. And one of the things that he did, he just listened. He was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so what you going? You know, so finding that safe place, not only for your organization, but for yourself. You know, finding somewhere where you can go and snap. You can go and be yourself. To be like, you know what, I ain't having a good day today. I don't want to do Young Chances no more. I'm ready, and it's like, for what? Like, you gonna lose, bro. And that's the reality. Like, I'm not gonna win if I don't do it. I've raised my hand too much for the losses. You know, I don't want to go back and see my mom struggle. See my daughters getting raised on pictures again. That's not my answer. So when I get to that point, because it's times where you think you're not doing enough, or you're taking them losses again when you're losing people in the community, or an email or grant didn't come through because you know that this will have that impact. You know, I have to trust in my Lord, you know, and lean out on my own understanding. Like, you have me here for a reason. You know, like I have a bullet in my head, back, leg, and arm, so it's clearly not my time. You know, I start questioning my reasoning. You know, like, you got them 3 girls, you know, like, what do you want to do to become a better person? And that's why I think that having this conversation with men, so the young men and the older can grab another Tyreek, you know, can grab another young boy that's out there that may be at that point, you know, understanding my purpose and knowing that I can't go back keeps me together sometimes.
One question I want to ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, while listening that there's generally not one solution for every problem. A lot of it depends on your circumstances, who you are, what your focus is at that particular time. So like when things occur, I kind of stick to the rule, try and give myself multiple options here to take care of this. And you know, there's number 1, number 2, and number 3, and the status is not related to the number. What is related to the number is that you have choice. And when someone comes to you for advice, it's not just one thing you can tell them and they got to go do it or gonna go do it. You know, when people come to me for advice, I look at the various options, because I always have, and say, well, you know, here's an option here, A, here's option B, here's option C. And that is, I think, very important in life to adopt. And if one doesn't work, there's still the second and third options for you to, you know, bring back into play. So does that make sense to you?
That makes perfect sense, because for real, having options is not something that I was used to or my community was used to. Either you win or you fail. You know, but now I know that it's cool to take a step back. You know, I don't know if it was Isan was talking about the elevator approach, the 12th floor and the basement. Sometimes we always want to get to the 12th floor because it's a perfect view, you know, but a lot of our emotions and a lot of the things that we really want to bring up there is in the basement. Our emotions is on that elevator. What floor are you on? A lot of us need to get to the lobby and bring those things together. And that's what I try to do. And if I see something going too far up on too many floors, or I'm reaching down too much, showing myself I have a lot of options. And that's even in the community where it may not be the food, it may be the clothing, it may be a hot meal, that those options are out there, because it shouldn't be just win or lose. It should be a choice.
Can I add to that? So piggybacking with what Doc was just saying too, going back to what I said about seeing and working back to conquering, you have to see where you are, who you are, and even when you are, because some of those things you're talking about with crisis, if it happens in the middle of the night, I may not have access to going for a walk at Kelly Drive, which is a good help for me. But 988 has helped me out. I've had to call 988 3 times. I've called it twice this year. And 988, somebody on the end of the line answers, and they give you psychological support immediately. So that's something that's immediate. But then there's other times when prayer is the only thing that I have. And I got to take this back to a conversation that used to happen when it came to mental health. It was like a dismissal of faith. And I think that it was necessary because it needed to be intentional, make sure we were getting real professional support, but it also can't eliminate faith, because some of the professional support comes because of the faith you have. Like if you go for a walk, your wellness, your physical wellness is a gift from God. Your relationships, all of those things. And then also if your faith informs you like mine does, that all things work together for the good, then that means that this thing that is overwhelming me is going to wind up working out for me, even though right now it's overwhelming and is really frustrating me. I had a moment where I was thinking about, I'm sorry, I just got a little overwhelmed. I've been thinking about this thing I'm dealing with lately called mourning the living. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's one of the top students in the state. She's on her way to an Ivy League school, and she's really decent. But I didn't think about what it'll feel like when you grow apart from your child, as a child grows into their own relationships and starts to become who they are. And it's got me not only mourning my daughter, but also looking back like, man, when I got 17 years old and went to Temple, I probably broke my mom's heart by not calling as much and stuff like that. And these are things that I think I didn't know how to define it until I experienced it. And now I challenge people to think, who's alive that you're mourning? And they're still here, but the dynamics of the relationships change. Who's older and their memory is going away, but they're still here, but the relationship looks different, it feels different. And I challenge people to think about those kind of things as you measure where you are, when you are, who you are, all of those types of things. And when the young people, you're talking about the 21-year-old and the 19-year-old, we need y'all. I had a gift from God this week where I was really overwhelmed thinking about my daughter, and I called my son. My son is 20, and my son encouraged me, and he encouraged me about things that I told him when he was a child. And I needed that. So some of the things that we learn and we teach, we need it because y'all are the future. You're the future leaders of the world. You're the future business leaders of the world, future fathers, grandfathers. One day y'all gonna be changing some grown folks' diapers, and we're gonna be those grown folks needing it, right? So we need the young people to learn, and I think that it's important as adults in the room to teach people to replace you. Teach somebody to do what you do. Because if you do that, you're creating a succession plan and you're doing things in a way that's not selfish, but is more selfless, and you really are living out scripture and considering the interests of other people. The children are the future. It's not just song lyrics. They really are the future. And they're now.
No, absolutely. One of the things I saw this past weekend was, I'm watching the game. Actually, I was at the game. I saw it on social media. I saw A.J. Brown walking into the game, and his shirt said, "Check on your teammates," right? And that was kind of deep, because that's what we're all talking about, how you deal with yourself, blah, blah, blah. But the question I'll ask Isan as well as Dr. J is, what can we do as better teammates to make sure that we're checking on our teammates? What are those things? Is it just a regular checkup? Is it me calling you every other day? Is it me texting you? What are those things that you guys practice that allows you to check on your teammates, the people that are in your circle, your boys, your friends, whoever those people are?
So for me, I had a few favorite teammates. The one who has withstood the test of time is Steve Mix. Probably not the first person you guys would think about, but Steve and I roomed together for 6 years. We played on the Sixers together. The irony of it is, when I joined the 76ers, I took his job. Because the year before, he was like an all-star playing that position. And then he suddenly was playing behind me. And he handled it real well. We coached together in the Big Three, which is the basketball league that Ice Cube created. So for the last 6 years, he's been my assistant coach, and my son Jules has been the second assistant. And the connection from 1977 to now is multiple lifetimes for most animals and also some humans. So Steve, I call him Sky. He calls me Doc. I call him Sky because he didn't jump that high. He said, "We call you Sky because you don't." And that's the type of humor that we share. It's personal, it's intimate. He blessed me in life. He asked me to be his daughter's godfather, who graduated from Drexel, who was a basketball player, and so on and so forth. And so the communication piece, I think about him every day. We might be on the phone 2 or 3 times a month. When we're coaching in the Big Three, it's an everyday conversation, and that's 10 weeks. But there's 52 weeks in a year, so those other 42 weeks, we just check in. We just check in with one another, make sure everybody's all right, and we both had some stuff. I had a stent put in my heart. And he was riding his bike and had a car accident, so he was laid up for a while. So you got to know when those things happen to one of your guys or one of your friends or one of your family members. And that's the thing that I think makes the difference. That you are a phone call away, or a flight away, or a car drive away, and but you're still there. And I just wanted to cite that example, since that was part of my 76er experience. That would have never happened if I hadn't come and played for the 76ers.
For me, just reaching out to people when they cross your mind. Like, I know way too many people, and I'm sure y'all do, to reach out to everybody every day. But when people cross my mind, be intentional about making that call, shooting a text, and reaching out. And I have history of losing people that informs me that I need to do that. When my brother died by suicide, he texted, "I love you and I'm sorry." And I didn't know that he was saying goodbye. So that informed me in a way that I don't ever want that to happen again. But it did happen again, not with suicide, but I lost a mentor who I didn't realize was suffering from cancer. Shelly Williams Leopard, she was an advocate for mental health and suicide prevention and a champion in this city. And she was suffering and struggling with cancer, and it took her life. And I had her cross my mind, and I didn't reach out. And I live with that regret now because she passed. And by the time I realized that I didn't reach out or remembered I didn't reach out, she was gone. So I try to make sure I reach out, but also reach out to people you can trust, and just reach out sometimes to express how you feel and give people a chance to show up for you. One of my best friend, actually not one of my best friend, I trust him with my life and he trusts me with his, and it was birthed on something that was humiliating. When I was at Temple, we both had the same experience happen on different days where we were really, really drunk, and I threw up on his floor one night and cleaned it up. He cleaned it up, and then one night he threw up on mine and I cleaned it up. Those are humiliating experiences, but it also was moments to like help somebody. And because of that, it's nothing I'll put past him when it comes to anything. And he also helped lead me to the Lord. So I trust him, you know what I mean? So trusting people that when you reach out, you can be supported is a huge thing. But also when people cross your mind, be intentional about saying something because you don't know when it's a smoke signal. And the final thing I'll say to that, I was suicidal many times in my life, but one of the times that sticks out to me, I remember saying to God, if you want me here, have somebody call me. And literally 1 minute later, somebody called me and said, you just were on my mind. And I didn't send out any smoke signals or anything. And this person lives in the Carolinas and just randomly hit me up. And it brought me, I pulled over my car and just cried. So you never know when somebody's on your heart or on your mind, how crucial it is to just reach out. And not only just for you, but for them. You never know why. Even if it's a hard conversation or you expect it to be a lot, just listen. Some people just need to be heard.
Yeah. You know, one of the best things, and I don't know how many people here miss sports. I know Doc obviously has. One of the best things and things that you miss the most. I mean, so you leave the game with a bunch of injuries, hopefully some money, hopefully, and most importantly, your memories, right? And the thing that you miss the most is being in your 20s and being with your boys all day long, just hanging out, going to practice, talking about each other, laughing and joking, and you miss that locker room experience. You miss just being around, because now Donovan lives in Arizona, and my boys live down in Florida, and he lives here. And we come together a couple times a year. We play golf, we have some drinks, smoke cigars, and we leave, right? But we don't get that full experience the way that we used to for 17 weeks during the football season. And one of the things that, as people, men and women, we have to create a locker room space where you feel safe, like you guys have been mentioning, that I could say, hey, this is going on in my household, and I know that you're not gonna say nothing to anyone else. And you can tell me the same thing, and I'm not gonna say anything else. And there are so many times that we don't feel comfortable. You just don't feel, I don't wanna tell him that. If I tell him that, what's going on in my world, he may use that against me, right? And then we do that enough, and eventually, now we're in a situation where we really need help. We don't have nobody to turn to. And so one of the things that I've just done, just been intentional about, is only surrounding myself with people that I care about, that I love, and I know care and love me. And maybe that's 2 people today, maybe tomorrow is 5. But those 5 people, if I got an issue, I gotta go to them. Those are the only people I'm talking to. I ain't trying to call my mother and hear her. I can't call my dad. My brother's younger than me, I'm calling my boys. And hopefully they give me some decent advice. And sometimes it's mentors, sometimes it's your boys, sometimes it's your teachers. We just implore you guys, especially young people, old people alike, older people alike, to find that group of people, that mentor, that shoulder that you can lean on to say, all right, I'm going through it, and I just need someone to listen. And as a mentor, someone that they're coming to, you have to be able to, and Doc said something earlier, and one of the things I see about Doc all the time reminds me of Mike Quick. Smooth, good looking brother, when he walking from everybody notice, right? But he's always listening. It ain't about his words, he's listening first and then gonna give you an answer. He ain't gonna overwhelm you with a bunch of words and all this other nonsense, because he's been around and knows enough to be able to do that. But first he's gonna listen. And to be able to be that good friend, you gotta be able to listen first. You gotta be able to say, all right, hold on, let me just sit back and let me hear what you got to say so I can address the problem.
Being who both of you are, and this like, what How do you picture pride to the side as your status, to ask for that help? Because people would think that you are in a position or you get to a certain place in life that you're not going to ask for help. How do y'all put your pride to the side? Because that's one of the challenges in our community, that the image of them being strong, them being men, or being in a certain situation that, I don't have to because I'm him. How do y'all address that to reach out for that help?
I would say that popularity is meaningless if people don't respect you. Totally meaningless. It's not worth it. So when I say, do they respect you? If somebody comes up and approaches him and he's with his children, his 3 children, he ain't got time for that 15 seconds they want, that 5 seconds they want. This is his kids' time. And you have to establish that. I mean, if you become a public person, you got to establish that rule and stand by it and enforce it. And if people don't like it, that's on them, because popularity is meaningless without respect.
It's so hard as a public figure to set boundaries. It's so important. It's hard to do it because people don't always respect it. It also was hard to ask for help. I think as an athlete, many athletes go through what I describe is identity foreclosure, right? You are at the top of the world. You're the best athlete or one of the best 1,500 athletes in the world, right? That's today. And tomorrow you get cut. Now you walk around as 5'7", 210 pounds, look like everybody else. And they're like, and you think that you're still the man, and you're not anymore, right? So the day after you get cut, retire, I got cut, and I was forced to retire. You walk around just like everybody else. And people treat you like everybody else, right? When your phone calls were getting returned instantly, now you may take a week to get the return phone call back. Life changes fast, and you start looking at yourself like, hold on, I'm not the same person that I was. And you start to wonder, these mental games start playing, and you're like, hold on, time out. If I don't have this, the thing I worked hard for, what do I have left? And you start looking around, you start looking at your friends a little different. Like, well, hold on. Did they like me because of the money, or they like me because they my friends? These young ladies, are they here because of that, or they here because of this? And so you start thinking, and I promise you, I went through, and after I retired, I didn't meet my wife for a couple of years. So I went through the world just living, good and bad times. And that's a scary time for a young man that has money, recognition, and you're trying to figure out life. And I can't imagine doing it without the support that I had. But still, you wonder, who the heck do I turn to? And when I turn to him, do I tell him the whole story or just give him the quick highlights and without giving real details? Made it through. My wife was a big support and helped me, mightily through that process, but it's hard for a lot of people. I don't know if you guys remember this guy named Julius Erving. Yes. One of the best linebackers in the NFL, nasty, physical, strong, tough, played in the NFL for, I want to say, 22 years. He was retired for 1 year, shot himself with a shotgun in the chest. Couldn't take it. He walked around as the baddest man on the planet for 22 years. And then life caught up to him. He didn't have the different avenues to decompress. Whatever he was going through, didn't have the right person to talk to. We all have to find that. And it's hard for professional athletes. It's hard for people that are waking up tomorrow morning and got to go to work from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's even harder, right? And we all have to find that answer.
Amen.
I know that we are going to wrap up soon. This conversation will keep going on all day. But one of the things that my mentor told me is you keep what you have by giving away, and that was Terry Carpenter. I'm going to give away that therapy is cool. You can go, you can talk, you can get the help. It's not okay to not address your issues. As the leader of the Young Chances Foundation, one of the things that I try to do is be that example. Trying to show and bring those things to the table that we're not going to talk about before it's too late. I wouldn't be here without my community because they understand not only what I'm doing today, but my family, what I've been through. And that's what I mean by that generational connection of making sure that the yesterdays understand us, and we can provide that for the tomorrow. So how do we as a community normalize this? How do we make this? And I'm just asking Brian and Doc, because I know that y'all have y'all organizations. How can we consistently make this cool or normal in our communities?
Well, one of the things we do with my foundation is we're always talking about it. I'm always grabbing the lure people like, what you need? How can I help you? What's the things that's on your mind? And the conversations like this change lives. I hope that you two young brothers leave here, you like, you know what? I can do better. Let me talk to my homeboy about this. Let me talk to my friend about that. Let me talk to my girlfriend, whatever the situation may be. That's how things spread. That's how things become viral. That's how we help communities. That's how we change communities. We got to continue the conversation. And we can't be afraid to say, I need help. If we're not afraid to say that, that's the start. And then hopefully your friends that are good enough around you can find you help somewhere. That's the hope.
So what he said about viral, I think it's important because the things that we believe and what we're creating here, with this time together, when it gets cut up and edited or whatever, there might be some gems in there that a person who is a social media nut or whatever can get a chance to hear and get a chance to see. And so that's something that hasn't always been around, but it ain't going nowhere. And and it's got a little twinge of AI in there too, so you're going to get stuff coming on your phone that you're not even asking for. But this is the world that we live in now. And my point was, it is a different society, it's a different world, it's a different way of communicating. But it's it's a heightened way of communicating, and to gain that understanding, you just got to use those channels and be thankful for them.
I would say also understanding boundaries. When we speak of boundaries, they're often spoken in a way to leave people out, but they also are meant to keep the people who are within those boundaries protected and cared for. And I would encourage people to look who's within your immediate sphere of influence and help them. We have a nonprofit organization that serves thousands of people around the country in some capacity, but we started off very small. We started off just having community conversations at local libraries, which anybody can do. The library allow you to use their community rooms free of charge. And we started off having community conversations at a library, 7 people. And now when we have events, and this is not bragging on our impact, but they grow. We now have hundreds of people in attendance when we put together things, and we're able to have a bigger impact. So I encourage people to do the smallest thing that you can do. If you know a young person, talk to them. I know how to play chess because a teacher who was not my teacher stopped me in the hallway at West Philadelphia High and asked me to be on the chess team. And then through that, he taught me how to debate and how to be in mock trial. So I learned those things from somebody who just took time to have a regular conversation. Somebody that you see all the time, and this is something I gained from Sonny Hill too. I was his mailman, and Sonny Hill used to pull me to the side and he could talk though, but Sonny Hill would just pull me to the side and just talk to me and tell me things and encourage me. And somebody out there, somebody you walk by every day, and you could talk to them, and you may change the course of their lives, and you also may impact your life, their life and yours, because that young person who may wind up going down a different path can be somebody that you influence right now to change their path and change your whole community by doing so. The final thing I want to say is that mental health is directly connected to spirituality. And if you think that it's not, and this is based on something that's even scripture, the Bible tells us that we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. So that's your mental health. And also, as a man thinks, so is he. So that's also your mental health. So you can't separate the two, because you can't actually even believe in a certain way if your mind is not activated and healthy in a certain way. So I encourage everybody to have a balance. Take everything that you heard up here today is not something that's absolute, but something that you can pull from as a buffet. One of the things that I never liked about, I know Wendy Williams is suffering, but I never liked on her show how people would come up at the end of the show and say, ask Wendy, and they'd be like, Wendy, I've been married for 44 years and he ain't take the trash out last night. And she tell him to get a divorce. And it's like, this is somebody who doesn't know your experience, and you're taking what they say is the gospel. We don't know any of your experiences, but what we're offering is hope and solutions that we know have worked or could work. Take those back to God, take those back to your family. Ask yourself the questions: where am I? Who am I? What am I? When am I? All of those things. And from there, work your way back to getting the care and support you need so you can be a model citizen and show up for yourself. And please invest in the lives of young people. They need it. I've seen young people through our chess and golf program transform. We mentor kids how to play chess and golf, and it's so decent how a kid who never picked up a golf club falls in love with it and doesn't want to leave the driving range. Or kids actually get frustrated playing chess, because that's a good thing, because that means that they know that they could think better. And you're seeing them self-regulate, learn how to be peer support for one another, and just stay in safe spaces. Thank you.
Well, certainly wanted to thank everybody for being here. It was an amazing evening. I think these young men have been an inspiration to both Doc and I. Doc continues to be an inspiration to us all. Continue to reach out in your community. Thank you so much to Penn Medicine. You guys have been amazing bringing us all together. And now we just have to continue to work. Like, that's the best part. Now we have an opportunity to continue to work. And that starts tonight. Thank you guys so much.